Hello and welcome to this session on The Blue Light. It is a story written by Vaikom Muhammad Bashir, and it was originally titled in Malayalam as Neela Velicham. What is the meaning of that?
Neela Velicham means blue light.
Yeah, blue light. Velicham means light, right? But when you talk about the word Velicham, we also have that in Tamil as well. Velicham means light, but we kind of have this association that it is some kind of organic light associated with the natural elements as well. But when you kind of talk about light in English, the connotations are the light associated with electricity, modern equipment, and the other related technology. So it's a very interesting set of association, velicham and light. Of course, in the English language, light would be associated with natural light too,
Yes.
right? But when it gets transported into this landscape, right, imported into this landscape through that conduit of colonial, context, things have different connotations and associations, right? So velicham and light, and light is a very interesting concept in this story, and I would say that it performs a narrative function in the tale. And how does it perform a narrative function is something we'll come to shortly, but I want to begin with this issue of translation. What we are reading is a translation from the Malayalam by O.V. Usha. So as readers, when we read the story, what are all the instances, the points in the story which kind of jerk us and say, oh yes, you're reading a translation, not reading in the original, right? Can you pick out some of the words or phrases or ideas which kind of indicate it comes from a particular language in a particular region?
In this text, there is one instance where he talks about he wants to tell the postman that he has moved on to this place, and he wants to tell him that his address has changed. So he goes and speaks to this postman, and the response that he gets, the immediate response that he gets is that, "Ayo sir, that place is haunted." So ayo means literally can be translated as oops or like ouch, like something like that.
Yeah.
So that very instance tells us that definitely this is a text translated from Malayalam. And I think...
So you're suggesting that ayo is a frequently used expression of distress.
Yes,
like,
definitely.
To indicate some kind of misfortune.
Yes, definitely. So, and not just in Bashir's text, you can see that these kind of words are often used by the writers to give that regional flavor to their text.
Yes.
So that is one.
Yeah.
And maybe there is this explicitly there is one instance where he says that there is, when he talks about the records that he has, he says there is nothing in Malayalam. So it is like he is talking to himself, saying that all the different languages have such beautiful works, but some nothing in Malayalam, like being a Malayali, we always yearn to have something from our regional language. So he is not able to find anything in his own mother tongue. So that dissatisfaction can be seen. So maybe that can also be associated, or like you can just pick that context and say that this is Malayalam text.
Yeah. There's like an indirect association with the identity of the speaker, of the central character. Can we read that? It's on page 71 in my collection.
As I went along, I wondered, with whose song should the new house be inaugurated? I have more than 100 records in my possession. English, Arabic, Hindi, Urdu, Tamil, Bengali, nothing in Malayalam. There are talented singers. They have cut records, but the music direction and finish of all of them is poor. But good directors and singers are coming up. Yes, I must buy some Malayalam records.
Okay, there's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, idea that he has a lot of records from other regions and other countries. He even has Arabic records, music records, but his own region doesn't seem to kind of produce something so excellent, which would kind of prompt him to buy those records. The other interesting thing, I think we have also talked about this in our other sessions on this story. It's a very cosmopolitan list of music records, right? There are records in English, Arabic, Hindi, Urdu, Tamil, Bengali, right? So he not only maps the Indian regions, he also is mapping other regions outside of the Indian continent. So he's not only, national in kind of integrating all the different music into his life, but also trying to be a world citizen in some ways, in appreciating music from different spots on the globe. So the regional element is sort of taking a back seat in this kind of context, in the kind of aesthetic appreciation that this central male character has, right? He is kind of connecting himself to aesthetics, outside of his own region primarily, right? He comes to his own space quite later on. He thinks that he should buy, but he hasn't bought it yet. Right, so he hasn't come home in that way, right? He's still a kind of a global citizen. So it's a very interesting story in that regard. The regional element is kind of hidden, right? In moments here and there. And you pointed out Ayo, that expression of misfortune, mild distress. Anything else that you can think about in relation to this idea of regionalism? Okay, let's talk about the name of the house. Bhargavi Nilayam. What do you make of that?
Nilayam means house, and Bhargavi is the name of the ghost. So normally this happens in especially in Kerala. You tend to name the house after the person, maybe the owner of the house. Sometimes you see that it will be named after the lady.
Yes, it's very important, isn't it?
Yes.
Because we understand that Kerala is a matrilineal society. There's a lot of importance given to the matriarch. The female lineage is more celebrated in some sense, and there is also a kind of passing down of property, houses to the eldest female, right? So the female does seem to have a lot of cultural significance, and to kind of have the name of the house associated with the female is also in essence a kind of a signifier for the kind of culture which belongs to Kerala, right? So that kind of I have been told that kind of matriarchal, matrilineal, culture is in the transition these days. I'll have to do my research to kind of find out whether that's true or not. But the importance given to the female is something that you can even see in other stories. And I think I have taught another story by Kamala Das called Summer Vacation, where you have a matriarch running the household like a ship, completely in control of the house, and she's one of the last remaining descendants of that lineage, right? And the grandmother possesses a lot of importance, and you can also sense that her granddaughter is the one who's going to inherit the house after her, and you can see the servants trying to curry favor with that little girl, right? So that kind of setup, the cultural setup, is something which is also unique to Kerala. So Bhargavi Nilayam means it's a Malayalam word.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So Nilayam means house, quarters, space, locality. So we have that, the local reference in that word for the house, Bhargavi Nilayam. Anything else? You want to talk about the setting of the house, right?
Yes.
And pick up on that. Yes, go ahead.
There's an excerpt where he talks about the setting of the kitchen and the well. He says, in front of the kitchen there was an ancient well with a stone wall round it. A small way off, in a corner of the walled compound around the house, stood a toilet, trees in abundance. The public road ran right before the property. when you read these lines, you understand that this is the kind of image that we get whenever we think about a typical, we call it Taravada or whatever. So that is the image that one gets. So you'll definitely have a well right in front of in your courtyard, and the mention about this toilet also is important. You have toilets outside the house, and I don't know why this public road also gives a nostalgic feeling about this long lost, the rustic life. It rings a bell with that. So that maybe you can see all these kind of settings in other regions as well.
Yes, correct. But they also belong to that particular region too. The fact that you can kind of connect with it in a nostalgic sense tells you, yes, it belongs to that particular world too, right? Very, very, very closely. So the thing about the public road, it's a very interesting element. If you go back to the first page of the story, the narrator says that it was a small 2-story building, Bhargavanilayam, far from the bustle and noise of the town, yet close to the municipality border. So it's not outside of the precincts of the town, and the public road seems to connect it with the rest of that, hustle and bustle, and it's not completely cut off. So even though it's isolated, right, far but not too far, not outside the bounds of that town, a decrepit board at the gate said, "For rent." I mean, so it's a very interesting setup, and this setup kind of connects it, as we talked in other sessions. It kind of connects it with the idea of the Gothic, because you can't really have a Gothic, a traditional Gothic, story bang in the middle of the city. It wouldn't work. The rustic. The word rustic is interesting. The rustic contributes, feeds the Gothic narrative. Right? So the rustic, the lonely, the isolated, and the rundown are some of the fodder for Gothic narratives. So you since you're from that region, you're able to kind of visualize this and say, yes, we have seen houses such as these. But to others, they would be able to connect it with similar housing that they have come across. So what do we understand when we are able to see this uncanny mirrors, right? It belongs to you, but not only to you, but to us too, right? So how do we understand that? We understand that these kind of accommodation are something which are prevalent across the southern region. Right, in a couple of other states too, right? So it's a commonality. There are commonalities, which is what I want to emphasize when we understand modern Indian writing and translation. The modernity, the shared sense of moving together, on shifts, on big shifts from modernity to postmodernity, or from a tradition to modernity. So we kind of seem to travel together, and there we have commonalities. So let's also look for similarities while we are looking for regional differences. Right, so the kind of setup is something that I can relate to as well. The courtyard and the well and the separated, the toilets outside of the main residential building. So this is something I have seen too in Tamil Nadu, and I'm sure people from other states in the south or even in the north could relate to this kind of setup. So these are all part and parcel of the Indian way of life too. We can share in that kind of identity through all these structures. So that's something we need to understand when we are kind of looking at these apparently very unique literature, right? Anything else that you can pick up in relation to
Ma'am, there is this instance where he talks about he going and playing cards with his
yes, talk to me about it.
That
card
game.
Yes.
That is when you it is even the representation of that can be seen in movies also. If you look at the old Malayalam movies, this is a common image that occurs often. But nowadays in the modern movies you cannot see such things. But earlier that was a form of recreation too.
Yeah,
So this was like a form of recreation for them, and that was that was actually the space where they got to socialize with other people. It was like what to say. People used to look forward to going and playing cards. So
this particular card game, is it unique to Kerala? It's on page 77. I did 3 rounds of salam. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Actually, yes.
Yes.
Salam is correct, but I'm not sure. I'm not really sure about the
intricacies, the rules and regulations.
Yeah, of the card game.
Okay, so but this will tell a reader from the region, from the state, that this event happened in those days, in 1950s or 60s, Kerala.
Even I have seen my folks playing card games and all, so I can very easily relate with this image.
Let's read that. So we played cards. My partner and I did 3 rounds of salam, mostly because my mind was on my story and I was distracted while playing Mostly because my mind was on my story and I was distracted while playing. The rain stopped at about 1. I got up and picked up the torch and kerosene bottle. Okay. When you were pointing about the fact that this card game gives the opportunity for socializing, you can see that this man is outside of it.
Yes.
Right? So even though that's the intention of that game of cards, he is distracted, his mind is on the story, and he is not concentrating on this kind of socializing. So this character is pretty strange in the sense that he loves his loneliness.
Yes.
He loves his isolation, which is why he kind of takes to the house, which is so far away, right? So you can see him fighting against that idea of socialization itself. Right, and I'm suddenly reminded of the fact that he assures Bhargavi, the ghost of Bhargavi, that you don't really have to think about harming me because I've been celibate all my life. Again, the idea of sticking to yourself, trying to keep to yourself, not trying to form bonds. With anybody, be it with a female partner, be it with your male buddy friends, so you can see that strand that strand of isolation, that alienation in the central character running through the story. Okay, what other?
There is this instance where he talks about this kerosene bottle, kerosene light.
Yes,
lamp.
yes.
I'm not sure about other.
I have an image. Yeah, I have an image of that lamp. Maybe we can also show the readers. See, this is the one. The hurricane lamp.
Hurricane lamp.
Yeah.
This is something that you can see in typical Kerala households.
Yeah, even in Tamil Nadu, I'm sure you can also find this in the rural regions. It's very common.
Yes.
And even outside, in the West, in other parts of the world, they use it. In fact, I was trying to find the definition for this, and it's also called tornado lantern. Hurricane lantern, tornado lantern, and they are used on ships as well, right? And outdoor construction projects. But in India, we associate this object with the rural world, isn't it? With country life. We see men carrying this at night or early in the morning at dawn, going to the fields to tend to the fields, right? So it's an idea that immediately evokes images of fields,
pastoral
life, as well as poverty, right?
Yes.
Lack of electricity.
Right?
Yes. And which is why when I began this discussion, I said light is important as a narrative function in the story. The whole story seems to be turning on this idea of having light and not having light, and how it impacts on the central male character. Right? So the ghost becomes significant because she offers light, that blue light, which will make this writer write. Right? So she's literally giving him spiritual light, to carry on with his task of writing. So this lamp, it kind of goes out for lack of kerosene, and the house doesn't have electricity, so he's forced to go and come back and find this. So the magic is there. So the magic seems to be created by this absence of electricity and the presence of all these very rudimentary kind of lights. So light is very important, and which is again we should remember that this is 1952. Kerala. This is a post-independence, immediately post-independent period where the entire nation didn't have the luxury of electricity. Only a few spots in cities and towns had electricity, and the rural life was still in darkness or had to make do with all these kinds of rudimentary light, right? So that's something we need to remember. What else? Can I also pick out some instances? Let me see. How about kuti? Bhargavi kuti.
Yes.
That's a very, very typical, Malayalam word used to refer to children.
Yes,
all children.
it's a term of endearment.
Endearment, kuti. So he uses that. Right? The moment he knows that there is a potential female ghost involved, he tries to kind of minimize. He tries to minimize the damage, the horror that would potentially come from that ghost by calling her Bhargavi Kuti.
Yes.
So the endearment becomes a strategy.
Yes.
Right? So he's kind of plumbing the cultural, treasure trove, which and it gives him all these weapons. It arms him. The cultural terms and terminology arms this writer. Protects this writer from ghosts such as Bhargavi. So when he says Bhargavi Kuti, he says it softly. Right? We don't know each other. I have come to stay in this house. I believe that I'm a good man. I've been celibate all my life. I've heard many rumors about you, Bhargavi Kuti. Look at the repetition. Right? Bhargavi Kuti is repeated in that entire page. Whenever he refers to Bhargavi, the Kuti is used. And that is very interesting. That really places the story bang in the middle of the Kerala region, yes. Right? That one reference, Kuti. So, what do you think about that? It's a term of endearment. We use it to little children as well as to perhaps girlfriends.
Yes.
Is that right? To wives. Right, and we also use that word for as names, as proper names.
I don't think Kuti becomes a proper name. Like most of the times, mothers will call their daughters Kuti, or like if you are a girl, to address you if they don't know your name. If somebody is elderly, they will refer you as Kuti. Apart from that, it is definitely a term of endearment, and sometimes it is used instead of honey. Like it's like instead of calling honey, they call it kuti.
Kuti. Yeah.
Nowadays, I don't think that people call grown-up people kuti, but sometimes what happens is that, like when you are young, along with your name, this kuti will be added, and then it becomes your name. So there are a lot of instances like that.
Okay. It becomes added and becomes part of the proper name.
Yeah, it becomes a portmanteau.
Right. So if you look at the references to Bhargavi, sometimes it's just Bhargavi and sometimes it's Bhargavi Kuti. So he just uses both names interchangeably. He says, sit down in this Bhargavi Kuti, pointing to a chair. And sometimes he says, I was talking to an idea, an abstraction, Bhargavi. I have not seen her. A young woman of 21. She is supposed to be 21 when she dies, right? Not a child.
Yes.
She's not a child, not a young child, but a woman in her 20s, deeply in love with a man. She dreamt of a life as his wife, as his life partner, and so on. So I was just wondering, what function does this reference to Kuti have? So one is immediately kind of diminish the threat, which could potentially arise from her, from this ghostly figure. What are the other possible function that is there in association with this name Kuti for the writer?
Maybe because when you use this term, there is a connection that is established.
Absolutely.
We don't go and call strangers Kutta or Kuti. Kuti is for girls and for Kutta from boys, but we definitely will not go and call strangers like that. So in order to establish that connection, he uses that. And when you like someone, it just comes out naturally. Maybe that is why I was using that.
It's very interesting that the establishment of a bond, right? That happens when you use that term of endearment, and he also says that let's share the house. You can have the the lower floor, the ground floor. I'll have the top floor. So they're like partners in that house, sharing the house, right? So close companions, bond of affection, and at the same time there is a kind of a romance brewing as well. Right, young folks. He's also in his 20s, and she was 21 when she died. And to call her Kutti, playing records for her, inviting her to sit on a chair when he's writing. These are like very intimate moments, and you kind of invite the the other sex to come and join you in that kind of space, and all these kind of seem to kind of lead the narrative towards that domain of romance, and that is kind of that comes to a head, or that comes to a culmination, or that is realized at the end of the story when he feels immense tenderness running through his body. So let's read that one. Okay, page 78, he says, out of sheer habit I took out my key and flashed the torchlight on the lock. The lock shone like silver. Why, it seemed to smile. I opened the door and went in, and now what I saw before me struck me with full force. An indescribable sensation surged through every atom of my being. No, I did not quake with fright. Rather, as I stood transfixed, my mind was flooded by a tide of tenderness. Right? Lots of affection for this sprite of a woman who is, offering him light through her magic, so that he can carry on his work. So you can see that reciprocation, that a reciprocation of affection, love, being displayed there for the readers. So Bhargavi Kutti is a very interesting name, and the name has several functions. It kind of establishes that the story is from the region of Kerala. It also establishes that the writer, the central male character, uses it as a strategy, but he also unwittingly establishes a bond of affection which is being reciprocated. So several functions are at play with that, just that use of that word, which is very interesting. Okay, so let's look at other words in the story. I have one, Parda. Yeah, so I was surprised and delighted. Why had no one snapped up this house yet? A lady of great beauty she was. She shouldn't be seen by anyone, should hide her behind Parda. Such unusual thoughts and feelings that old house evoked in me. I was in a happy daze, I was entranced. So if you read this out of context, you would think that he's talking about a beautiful girl, right, or a beautiful woman, and he believes that such beauty should be hidden behind a parda. So parda is very interesting because it is used without any kind of explanation. But we as readers, Indian readers, and readers who know something about the Orient, the East, or certain cultures such as Islam or even in Hinduism, we have the idea of veiling, right? Women are, used to use this veil so that they can hide their face and body. So this parda is an interesting word employed by the writer. Right, it indicates that such usage in Hinduism and in Islam, where women use those veils, right? So it immediately kind of tells us that there's no need for any kind of translation, right? So it has become so common to some of us that we don't need any kind of translation to make us understand this word. What are the other signification in relation to this word parda?
Parda is a term, I think it is used everywhere in India. So although you have other terms for it, parda is something that is that I think everybody knows. We need not. It is
Yeah.
self-explanatory.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out what exactly is the meaning of parda. When I was thinking about this word, okay, in terms of translation, we don't need translation because we know what it means. We are aware of the culture. But when you apply it to a house, which seems to kind of stand for an attractive female, things become complex, right? The house is metaphorically referred to a female. And ironically speaking, it is done in a story where there are no flesh and blood female characters.
Yes.
So it's as if the female identity itself is in a parda. You understand?
Yeah.
There's a veil which is kind of preventing her from being seen. So what we have is only a trace, even in the text,
Yes.
right? We have a trace of Bhargavi. We don't see her in the story as a flesh and blood woman, just as we have the male writer, right?
Yeah.
So she's entirely invisible, as if she's behind a curtain. Right? And even when he asks her, come and have a seat, he says that there's only, he can feel the air, but there was nobody occupying it, right? He says, I don't like anyone watching while I write. I turned my head, no one was there. I'm not sure why, but I didn't want to write anymore. I drew up another chair in front of me. In front of mine, sit down in this Bhargavi Kuti, chair stayed empty. So this idea of emptiness occupying this identity is really weird. It's a strange feeling to have a woman, but she is represented as an empty signifier. The emptiness, that we get, where we should have that female figure, is connected to this idea of parda. So we have the curtain, but not the woman behind it in the story. Right? So what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is this. Yes, certain ideas, certain words, certain cultural concepts are interesting. Parda, kuti, BD. There's a reference to BD. BD is something that, the Indianized or indigenous smoke, the cigarette that men use and sometimes women. So these are very interesting. It places a story in a particular cultural context, right? And these are important to us. The hurricane lamp, it kind of evokes mind pictures in our memories, in our minds. But more than that, what are the kind of identities that structure the men and women at play in that particular space is what fascinates me, right? So yes, we are reading a translation. That's important, because that voice is being brought to the limelight. That voice from Kerala is being brought to the limelight, right? That voice of Bashir telling a story is important. It needs to be recorded. It needs to be told not only to the people from other states, across the nation, but also globally, because these are also sophisticated voices making up very interesting stories. That's important. It is also important not just exoticize.
Yes.
Right? It's also important not to just appreciate the cultural curiosity, all these kerosene lamps and BDs and pardas and Nilayam, Velicham, all these exotic sounding words. We shouldn't stop with them. We should just go beyond that, probe beyond that to find out what kind of place such men and women have in society. What is their function? Why do we have a surviving male but not a surviving female who is also well educated in this story, right? Bhargavi is a graduate, yes, but she kills herself in that well, which is so iconic, yes, to you, since you're from that region, right? So it evokes a lot of nostalgia for the land, but unfortunately that well, that antique well, is also associated with tragedy, right, for a female. Right? So here we have a male who's willing to share space, very, very progressive. He's willing to share space. He's willing to offer a chair in order to make her sit on a chair, give her equal status with him, right? But unfortunately, we don't have that body occupying that space, and why do we have such tragedy? So these are some of the questions I think which we need to ask to make real sense of these translations, right? And not kind of put them in these ghettos or in these categories or in these silos and say, oh, this is from Kerala, oh, this is from Telangana, this is from Andhra, and this is from Kannada. They're exciting, they're exotic, and stop. Right? I think we need to kind of explore further and see what kind of cultural consciousness emerges from these stories, and what kind of consciousness are they? Right? How is that society structured? How are all these figures placed? What are the kind of hierarchies there? So if we probe these and then kind of celebrate them, I think these works will stand the test of time.
Yes.
Right? Thank you for your thoughts, Mridula. We'll carry on our conversation in relation to other stories in the sessions to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.